There is a photograph, taken sometime in the mid-1800s, of a wide European boulevard. The buildings are tall, ornate, and impossibly detailed stone facades carved with precision. Windows aligned in perfect repetition, streets stretching far into the distance. The lighting suggests a busy afternoon, and yet something feels off. There are no people, not a single figure walking, no carts in motion, no animals, no signs of life. Just an entire city, complete, constructed, and silent. At first glance, this absence can be explained. Early photography required long exposure times, sometimes several minutes. Anything that moved simply wouldn't register on the plate. A passing person would dissolve into invisibility, leaving behind only the static world. This is the official explanation, and in many ways, it makes sense. But as you continue looking through these images, Paris, London, New York, entire districts captured in stunning clarity, the explanation begins to feel incomplete. Because even in long exposures, not everything disappears. Stationary figures should remain. Someone sitting, someone leaning, a carriage paused. Yet again and again, we see vast urban environments that appear untouched by human presence. It is not just the emptiness that draws attention, it is the scale. Entire cities, already built with a level of architectural sophistication that would require immense labor, time, and coordination, appear fully formed in these photographs. Streets laid out with precision, buildings that would challenge even modern engineering, infrastructure that suggests a thriving, complex society. And yet, in these images, there is no trace of the people who supposedly built and inhabited them. The accepted historical timeline tells us that these cities were expanding rapidly during this period, fueled by industrialization, population growth, and economic change. Construction was ongoing. Streets were crowded. Life was dense and chaotic. But the photographs do not always reflect that chaos. Instead, they present something else. A stillness that feels less like a technical limitation and more like a moment suspended outside of time. In some cases, there are figures, but they appear blurred, ghost-like, as if they are not fully part of the scene. In others, there are individuals who remain perfectly still, captured with unnatural clarity, almost as if they were placed there intentionally. This raises a quiet question. Were these photographs simply documenting reality, or were they composing it? Photography, especially in its earliest forms, was not as spontaneous as it is today. Each image required preparation, intention, and control. Subjects were often arranged. Scenes were chosen carefully. The act of taking a photograph was deliberate, almost ceremonial. So it is not unreasonable to consider that some images may have been staged. But staged for what purpose? To create an idealized version of the city, to emphasize architecture over human activity, to present order instead of chaos, or something else entirely. As more of these photographs are examined, patterns begin to emerge not as definitive proof, but as recurring anomalies that invite closer attention. There are images of massive buildings that appear newly constructed, yet there is no visible evidence of construction. No scaffolding, no workers, no tools. Just finished structures, already weathered in subtle ways, as if they have existed longer than the timeline suggests. There are photographs of grand exhibitions, world's fairs, temporary cities built with extraordinary, detailed structures that resemble ancient architecture, complete with domes, columns, and intricate ornamentation. Officially, these were constructed in a matter of months or years, only to be dismantled shortly after. The explanation is that these were temporary facades, made of lightweight materials like plaster and wood. And yet, in the photographs, they do not appear temporary. They appear solid. They appear permanent. They resemble something that was not built quickly, but rather something that had always been there. And then there are the ruins. Across different parts of the world, we find images of cities partially destroyed, buildings buried, streets at unusual levels compared to their surroundings. In some photographs, entire lower floors are hidden beneath ground level, as if the earth itself has risen or the structures have sunk. The official explanations vary: flooding, urban development, natural shifts in terrain. But the pattern remains. Layers, discrepancies, a sense that what we see on the surface may not fully represent what lies beneath. Returning to the photographs, one detail becomes increasingly difficult to ignore: consistency. across continents, across cultures, across different photographers. The same visual language appears. Empty streets, monumental architecture, a lack of transitional phases, no clear evidence of cities being built step by step. Instead, there is a recurring impression that these places simply appeared. Of course, this impression can be challenged. Historical records exist. Construction documents, population data, written accounts. The development of cities is well documented in many cases, but documentation, like photography, is also a form of representation. It captures certain aspects while leaving others unrecorded. And sometimes, what is left unrecorded becomes more interesting than what is preserved. There is also the question of perspective. Most of these photographs were taken from elevated positions, towers, carefully chosen vantage points that emphasize scale and symmetry. This choice of perspective creates a particular narrative, one of order, control, and completeness. But what lies outside the frame, what is not shown, if the goal was simply to document daily life, one might expect more images at street level, capturing the density and movement of people. We often see the distant views that remove the human element almost entirely. This could be a matter of technical convenience, or it could reflect a different intention. As we move further into the late 19th century, photography becomes more advanced. Exposure times decrease. Cameras become more portable, and gradually, images begin to include more people, more movement, more spontaneity. The cities become populated again. The silence fades, but those earlier images remain. They exist as a kind of visual record that feels both familiar and distant, grounded in reality, yet slightly disconnected from it. And this is where the idea begins to expand, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility. What if these photographs are not just documenting the past, but also shaping our understanding of it? What if they present a version of history that is incomplete, not intentionally deceptive, but selectively framed? And what if, within that framing, there are traces of something that has not been fully explored, a gap, a missing context, a layer of history that does not fit neatly into the timeline we are accustomed to? It does not require rejecting established explanations to consider this. It only requires noticing where those explanations feel insufficient, because sometimes the most interesting questions are not about what we can prove, but about what we have stopped questioning. The empty streets, the fully formed cities, the structures that seem older than their recorded origins. Individually, each of these details can be explained, but together they form a pattern that is difficult to ignore. Not a pattern that demands a conclusion, but one that invites attention. And perhaps that is where the real significance lies. Not in uncovering a hidden civilization or rewriting history, but in recognizing that our understanding of the past is built from fragments, images, records, interpretations, all of which are shaped by perspective. The photographs do not speak. They do not explain themselves. They simply show us something that was, or at least something that was presented as real. And in that presentation, there is always a choice what to include, what to exclude, where to stand, when to capture the moment. So when we look at those silent cities, those empty streets frozen in time, the question is not just what we are seeing, it is also what we are not, and whether, somewhere in that absence, there is a story that is yet to be fully told.